Thank you so much for coming. As someone that does not live in DC and go to events in person that much, it's an honor to be in the room with everyone and feels like a great reunion of a lot of folks we've had the chance to work with over the last several years. We have a pretty full agenda today, so really appreciate y'all coming in. We're going to have a lot of participation time. We have a couple of presentations, but just wanted to say at the top, a little bit of housekeeping, and then I'll get into the agenda and the actual content. There are snacks in the back. Food, water, bathrooms are to the back right corner over there. We're not going to have time for introductions across the board. So just anytime you do speak or raise your hand, please introduce yourself. And then we'll have time for table discussions as well, where you'll get to meet others in a more dedicated way. And then we will have a short bio break, but at any point, obviously, excuse yourself if you need to, that is fine. So without further ado, really excited to kick off this project today with y'all. If you've been around for a while, we have been talking about a digital service of the planet for about 5 years. And so we're going to spend a bit of time talking about like, what is that history and why now? Why are we relaunching this event? What does it look like? And then you'll have a chance to hear from the 4 different fellows. There'll be 6 fellows in total about their specific work. And then really want to have a chance to say, like, how do y'all want to be involved? What are things and other complementary initiatives that we might not be aware of, but have the opportunity to work together more closely with over the next 15 months or the end of next year? And then we didn't formally make a happy hour, but just wanted to invite folks because it is great to be in person, and there's a place right downstairs that we'll head to after the formal event. And so with that, I'm going to pass it to my New America colleagues, and I think Lillian is going to join us first virtually for why we're here in context setting. And Simone, I don't know if you wanted to come up, but cool. Thanks.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. Perfect. Well, first, I'm really excited to be able to join you. Jesse, it's funny to hear you say that it's been 5 years in the making on your end. For us, we've been talking about doing something like this for nearly a year. And so I'm just very eager that we were able to really make this collaboration with you all happen. So I am sorry I cannot be there this week. We've had a busy week with 2 launch event, but I am excited to sit in virtually in the room and listen to the discussion. I'm Lillian Corral. I'm the Vice President of Technology and Democracy Programs at New America. I'm excited to be with you all today. First, I'll share a little bit about our program. So across our work, we really focus on building a sustainable digital future that fosters equitable opportunity, innovation, fundamental rights, and participatory governance. So in short, we work on technology that strengthens democracy, rebuilds public trust, and improves people's lives. And whether it's broadband access or AI governance, digital public infrastructure, or now through this initiative, environmental innovation, our work is really about connecting technology and policy to serve the public good. So we are very excited to see this idea come to life. This particular work sits at the intersection of 2 big questions we think about every day, which is how technology can build public institutions and help them work better for people, and then how it can help us tackle more urgent challenges that we face in this time. And so the Digital Service for the Planet program is really just a powerful example of what we at New America mean by technology in service of the public good. And I'm also particularly proud because this is really a collaboration between several New America programs and the Environmental Policy Innovation Center. So New America's Technology and Democracy Cluster of Programs and the New Practice Lab, which Simone works with, is really helping to build new capacity for us at New America to really coordinate across our organization and with partners like you all who are committed to impact in this area. We often focus digital innovation in our space on social programs or city services, but environmental protection, as you all know, is really a deeply human systems problem. It's about how people, data, and infrastructure come together to make policy real. And our goal and hope for this is really to help bridge that gap and to ensure that policy doesn't just stop at good intention, but reaches real impact. At a moment when more and more of us are feeling the effects of climate change, I live in Los Angeles, which is where I'm situated today. This year has been a real testament to that challenge. it's really a privilege to be able to bring resources and talent together to help address these climate challenges. So to share more about the actual pilot and work, I'll turn it over to Simone. We are excited to be able to learn and partner with all of you in the room, and especially the fellows that are going to be leading this work. And so, Simone, turn it over to you.
Simone Brody with the New Practice Lab. As Lillian said, I think a core insight driving a lot of our work here at New America is that policy is only as good as it is implemented. And so writing legislation, crafting regulations is really, I would argue, maybe the first 10%. And the hard work really is in determining how that policy gets implemented in states and cities and affects people's lives. And so we really believe that those creating that policy need to understand both the opportunities and the challenges that emerge when policy hits the ground. And so that starts, as we spent some time talking with the fellows this morning, with really having data, technology, infrastructure that enables us to understand the problem and define the need, then trying to use that information to identify what are some possible interventions, opportunities to really drive progress on that, and then be able to, again, with data and technology, really understand what is working and what isn't, and be able to continue to iterate. This is a field like so many that we work in that doesn't have a deep evidence base. And so how are we together building that base around, how do we define the problem and then what is working to address them? And so we are thrilled, as Lillian said, to be partnering with EPIC to apply this thinking to perhaps our world's largest priority at the moment, which is accelerating environmental progress. I think that we are all very clear-eyed about the challenging time for this work as we hit here today, the need to rebuild systems, to carry forward efforts that are no longer getting prioritized at the federal level, and that the stakes are really enormous. So are so excited to have our Digital Service for the Planet Fellows, a very impressive group that you will meet here in a moment, kind of working on these vast, urgent and important issues. So from forest and land management, we'll hear about safe drinking water, permitting reform, and wetlands protection. And so, like all enormous big problems, you have to start small and figure out what works. And so the progress starts today with so many of you who have been doing this work and with these fellows, with a small group of people kind of getting to work and building both the skill and the will within government institutions and among partners to do this kind of work. And it kind of starts with finding that intersection of what is really important and what is urgent, and what are the pressure points where we can demonstrate small progress to make people continue to be invested in the long-term goals that we all have. And so this 15-month pilot, as Jesse said, is really about learning. We are trying to understand how this work is best done in the specific context of government and other partners. Who are the government kind of innovative partners and outside government partners that are ripe to do this work? And then what are the most interesting opportunities, both short-term and long-term, that are ripe for new ways of working? So we hope we will all get into that conversation today and hear your thoughts on that. And I think most importantly, what we're all here for is how can this work actually improve the lives of people across this country, because that is a real long-term measure of progress. And so all of what we're talking about is the intermediate steps to that. And so your role, a very active one, as Jesse said, is we're excited to be here with you because you're our coalition, you're our partners, you're our mentors in this work. And so you all bring really hard-fought expertise and experience. And so we are going to share some of what we're thinking, some of what our great expert fellows are thinking. And we really want to hear your thoughts, your reflections, your skepticism. This is really about asking questions, but also challenging the current thinking and the current ideas, and to see where this can go, both experience within the field and experience out of the field. So we want to make sure that we can get the most out of these 2 hours together. So I'm going to turn it over to Jesse, and really excited to be here. Thanks, guys.
Okay. So like I said, we're going to do a little bit of history in 10 minutes of the past 4 years. And like I said, EPIC has been talking about digital service for the planet for a long time. Our first call to action was in 2021. I invite you to not read that. It was probably the worst design, but a lot of really good content in terms of knowing that the traditional digital service model would not work when applied to an environmental context. One of the first kind of mentors that I had when starting the technology policy program at EPIC said environmental agencies have complementary and overlapping data needs, but do not act that way. They do not team in the ways that they could bolster one another's initiatives and are quite siloed. And that has stuck with me over the last 5 years as we've been working on this, and has kind of paved the way for why we are thinking about what these interconnected ways of working within the environment could be. And so we know that this moment has changed, but for a long time, all of us have known that the ways in which environmental data is created, is managed, is shared, is used by the public and by decision makers needs to look quite differently. And initially, we were thinking about kind of 3 primary pillars. So what is the quality of information that we have about our environment? One example we point to, and we'll talk a lot more about today, is our wetlands. National Wetlands Inventory is 40 to 50 years out of date, depending on where you are, and that is the best high standard that we have. And to address that, within one state in particular, the estimate was $10 million and 10 years, right? And that kind of effort cannot continue to the pace of the quality of information we have about our environment. The second is the way in which technology is used by environmental agencies. We'll do another deep dive in permitting, as Simone mentioned. And in one example where we heard from Army Corps staff, it is a quite manual process. And 10% of the time it's sent back because of incomplete data, which means you kind of need to start again. And that's mainly in terms of what are the systems and software that they're using when processing permits. And then lastly, there's a big need for interagency coordination. We know within drinking water in particular, there's 52 different agencies at the federal level that manage drinking water. They are not acting in that, they're all quite siloed in terms of how they're doing that. And when we looked at how much money environmental agencies are spending when it comes to IT that is related to delivering on their mission, it's about $1.5 billion. And 96% of the time, it's one agency at a time that is investing in that software. So what are the ways in which we can have shared services and shared technology across agencies that have similar missions? And so with that is kind of the policy platform that we spent the last 3 years in a concerted effort working on. Again, 3 points here for many more efforts, but just wanted to point out that after we launched this first call to action around a digital service for the planet, we worked really closely with our partners at Federation of American Scientists to create a day one memo for the Biden administration in terms of how could we have a team within government that's focused on strategic planning and procurement, technology development, and then that cross-agency coordination on digital infrastructure, and really formalize this policy proposal. That led us to working with folks within Council on Environmental Quality and the U.S. Digital Service to create the first dedicated team related to environmental justice and climate initiatives. And then, which was a really big win, that was phenomenal. And then helped CEQ get their first Presidential Innovation Fellow placed that was focused on permitting innovation initiatives. That team and that fellow are still there and doing great work. The environmental justice team no longer exists, but another reason, we'll get into that later today. And then within 2024, what was really exciting is both on the environmental justice side and the permitting innovation side, we saw the White House, again, the Council on Environmental Quality, create 2 teams that were technically oriented to advance their initiatives that were intentionally kind of a whole of government approach to technology. And then we were on track at the end of 2024 to bring on 10 plus people to create this digital service for the planet within the White House. That has not happened. That is not the case. But just really paved the way for formalizing what is it that we know environmental agencies need, what is the ecosystem that needs to be created, and then what a lot of this, right, is like what happened at the White House, but there was a lot of agency-related effort that was occurring and state and out of agency, external support as well. So with that very quick context, it'll bring us to where we are today, and I'm going to bring up Reed to talk through that.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Reed Van Beveren, the Deputy Director of EPIC's Technology Program. And so, yeah, things have changed. That's likely to be one of the biggest understatements of the day, I think. But what we really still think is true about the DSP concept is really that we need the expertise in data, product, design, and policy to be available to work on the issues that we care about related to environmental data and technology. And so that's why we're relaunching DSP today, a new look DSP. You'll hear from some of the fellows that we have that work across those different kind of skill set areas and learn more about their work. So let's just talk a little bit more about how things have changed. So we're at a critical crossroads right now. We all know that, but just to kind of like frame out some of the changes that we're seeing. So in terms of policy, right, we've seen policies and initiatives change significantly, right? We've had changes to climate change policy. We've had rollbacks of Justice 40, which was a big driver of innovation for understanding what the impact of federal programs was in local communities, for example, right? That's had implications for the tools and data. Some of them have been directly removed, right? And so we've been involved in efforts to stand those back up. I could go on, right? There are proposals on the table that erode transparency related to wetlands, for example. So things are changing constantly at the policy level. In terms of staffing and budget, we've obviously seen huge disruptions, right? So we've seen entire teams, basically CIOs teams that have gone by the wayside in environmental agencies. We've seen an exodus of specialists with deep institutional knowledge about the programs and the research that is core to our work. Right, we've seen nascent teams that were working on AI that were starting to make progress also start to leave the federal government. And there's also the funding piece, right? We have no idea kind of where the funding is going to land for a lot of these initiatives that we really care about. We've seen some of them zeroed out. We've seen some of those zeroed out go back to full funding. We've seen some that continue to be funded. So it's a very dynamic landscape. And then finally, the need and the opportunity still remain, right? So just because we've seen so much disruption doesn't mean there isn't some element of opportunity in that, right? There are some opportunities to take a more collaborative and bottom-up approach to building the data and tools that we want to see come to fruition. There's still some nods to interoperability and better design, even in some executive orders, right? And whether we like it or not, we've been thrust into a new era of experimentation with artificial intelligence, right? So there is still a lot to work on and a lot to work on at the federal, state, and local level. So in terms of like our approach, and this is all kind of embedded into the fellows' work, and you'll hear a little bit more about that, but we're really thinking of our work as operating on 3 levels today at once, right? One is advising and stewarding what government data collection, environmental protections, good governance, right? We've always been a close partner to government agencies, and we continue to advise government agencies and partners on how to build that. Second piece is really building networks and supporting distributed teams, right? I think one of the changes here has been the fragmentation of many teams that were working on this. And so embedded in every fellow's kind of work is building the networks needed to advance our priorities. And then the third here is really about, even though there are so many impacts in the short term, we also need to keep an eye on the future. And we need to be designing a vision that we can maybe start to put in place little by little now, but also when the time comes, hopefully all at once, we'll be able to make progress, right? And so we feel like we're operating at all of these different levels. Okay, and so with that, we did want to move into a little bit of discussion and hearing from you. And so we've got some questions up here, but the one we really wanted to start with is this one about like reality, right? What other realities are you all seeing that a DSP cohort and the DSP idea itself really have to contend with in this moment that we really need to address or try to mitigate to be successful? So we're going to have, I think, mics available for anyone that want to speak up. And
yeah, that's right. And so we have about 15 minutes. This first discussion we thought could be a broader group. Welcome any ideas as you want to popcorn it out. And then we'll have a short break, and then we'll hear from our fellows, and then have the breakout discussions within the table. So at this point, just want to invite folks in terms of like we have framed out some of the things that we're seeing, but what are y'all seeing? What else should we be mindful of as we enter this next phase? Yeah.
I see one.
So I think also Ryan Hathaway with Lawyers for Good Government, formerly the White House Environmental Justice Director, but not there for reasons, bad reasons. I will say, so one of the things that we found when working with you all and folks, the wonderful Cameron that you have given a home to, which I'm incredibly thankful to Epic for, is that the data analysis and like what comes after is only as good as the data that's been collected. And we saw and see consistently now, like water sensors, air quality monitors, things that should be equitably distributed across the country are most often in wealthy areas. And so how do we address the inequity in just collecting the information we need while we build the systems that help kind of analyze and come up with what to do with that information?
Yeah. I have a few thoughts that I want to respond to on that front. I mean, I think one of those things, right, where we had budgets have been zeroing out and then coming back. In the early days of the Trump administration, we saw folks that were responsible for maintaining the sensor networks that manage our air, waters, lakes, streams. They were not able to travel. They were supposed to stay in the office, or they had a travel budget of zero, such that they couldn't afford gas or hotels or batteries to actually maintain sensors. In some agencies that's changed, and others I've heard that it's still a little rocky and unclear. But so that's one thing we want to keep advocating for, is just like the continued federal data collection. But beyond that, as you said, the location of those sensors is a bit inadequate. And there's a need to both expand that sensor network and have more community generated information. And I know that there are folks in this room that are thinking about that exact issue. I don't know if you have further thoughts. I'm looking at you, Sam, because we had a long talk about it during the Oakland summit. But
Here I am. It's a super important question, and you hit the nail on the head with the need to.
who are you?
Oh yes, sorry everyone. I forgot that Jesse knows me, but most of you don't. So I'm Sam Kay. I until August was with the PACJ office, and now trying to figure out how to take some of that work in meaningful ways forward on the outside, along with colleagues both from inside and elsewhere. One of the things that we also completely agree is a way, especially if the federal government is not going to, in the foreseeable future, resume the work of filling in gaps of sensor networks. And I'm thinking of like the National Ambient Air Quality Monitoring Network, like the 6 criteria pollutants being such a low-hanging fruit, got lots of attention under the last administration. And now there are companies like Just Air and sensor providers like QuantAQ and many others in that space who are putting up nearly regulatory quality networks that at the very least have all kinds of public health applications. And wouldn't it be great to be able to bring those seamlessly into the very same screening platforms that are supporting regulatory and permitting decisions? And there are opportunities to do that now that the federal government has taken its hand off that wheel. And it'll be interesting to see what collectively we're able to innovate on the outside to address that, among other needs.
Does anyone else want to keep taking this line of work? Are we moving to other questions?
Any other thoughts?
I mean, one thing about being in collaboration at New America is we had a similar, like, when communities aren't being served, Lillian, hopefully you can hear this, broadband project underway in the same public interest technology program that was much more community driven. And so there may be models on the like CBO architecture for this that are from another lane of work. In fact, actually, it's an amazing story that when Sandy hit in New York, it was like a community-run broadband network that sustained itself when the city went down. And so there are other ways where, again, like in a moment where small d democracy is another line of questioning. But what my question for us was like, if I really do risk management, and did I say I'm Tara McGinnis and I work here and I'm a happy collaborator on public interest technology. I think looking at the slides, like it is totally true that policy and government, for those of us with our feet in the occupied District of Columbia, it's like hard not to see the destruction at a big P policy level. But having just swum back and forth between here and Berkeley, California, there is this other through line of massive potential transition happening in this same period from a small number of companies that are designing data architecture and futures, and having spent a couple of days with some of the RL and ML researchers from the major LLM labs, like this is not the conversation they're having at all. There was not a single mention among the most senior executives of energy in days and days. And so I do think the other through line of risk and potential scenario planning is in the context of AI transformation in the same period.
Yes.
And and this is Lillian from the Voice of God Above. I can hear, so thank you, Tara. And yes, I do totally agree with your model idea.
It's a big question, and we intentionally didn't have an AI pillar, but every single one of these projects has an AI lens or is thinking about what is the data readiness that is necessary, what are the metadata standards, what is like all of the infrastructure, both data and human, that you need to be able to leverage AI in a number of different contexts. I think if there's specific examples that our fellows want to name, they can, but yeah. And I think the other piece of this, right, is that we've thought about our data and technology program as all AI is one piece of that agenda. And so haven't wanted to like reband to just AI, but it's embedded inherently in the work.
To that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Also, so I'm the senior fellow for AI and ecosystem management. It's been brought in under the DSP pilot, and AI is something I'm very enthusiastic about in the realm of environmental innovation and thinking about how I come from the federal government. We tend to, we tend to silo off. Like if there's an AI program, I led an AI program. And in doing that, you're not really infusing the technology across an agency or across an organization. So I love that like Epic has taken this opportunity to like do it differently. And in relationship to like the through line that you just mentioned of between, the contrast between DC and like San Francisco, the potential for AI or like advanced computing, right? The raw computational power that is being thrown at a lot of problems in society right now. We've had technologies available to do things like predictive wildfire analytics for a long time, but we have not had the computational power to leverage that at scale for some of the environmental problems that we're facing right now. So I'm very enthusiastic about AI as applied to ecosystem management.
What else are folks seeing?
Nope.
Yeah.
You can really.
Wait, sorry. Just wait for the mic only because we have people online. Thanks.
Hey, I'm Izzy Zahorian. I used to work for US Digital Service. I got to hang with Ryan a little bit and Cameron, and I'm a huge fan of Epic and New America. So thanks y'all for everything you do. This might be like ridiculously obvious, as I mentioned, but one of the things, I have a lot of background in like public benefit space. And so a lot of the energy we're seeing right now is sort of moving towards rural America and like with the like Make America Healthy Again campaigns and whatnot. A lot of the funding is going to rural communities. And so one of the sort of like data storytelling elements I'd love to see is just how like climate resilience creates jobs and like creates jobs specifically in communities that feel left behind, including by like climate science language or what have you. So I don't exactly know how to put it, but I just feel like environmental justice is so critical. And I would love for there to be a common sense way for folks who maybe are skeptical that climate change is real to still see how impactful it is to bring renewable energy to your community or to like provide upskilling and jobs or what have you, even in a world where they still are not really grasping the full effects or impacts of climate change on a daily basis.
Yep. Couldn't agree more. And one of the ways in which we've talked about that throughout our work is just you should know if your water is safe to drink, if it's safe to swim in that lake, if it's like to, fish in that river. And that's something that everyone can get behind. And also we've done a lot of work in Texas specifically around equitable access to drinking water. In Texas, we say durable drinking water. And, how do you make your water as durable as possible and resilient to floods, storms, and other events? But yeah.
Yeah.
This will be the last comment before a short break.
Thanks, Jesse. Tim Mail. I'm also on the EPIC team and love the work of New America. A quick story to your point. The Army Corps has separate districts all across the country, 50 odd districts. And you wouldn't think it, but the district that has the most climate smart management plan for the reservoirs, the drinking water and agricultural water supply reservoirs in the country is in Oklahoma. And the reason is because there's a statutory deadline that says they have to update their reservoir management plans every 5 years. And that's the only district that follows the deadline, that follows the law. And because they follow the law, they look at the data every 5 years, and the data shows they need to store water differently because of current climatic conditions. And so they just do it. And so I mention that because it's often, profound and kind of left of center, right, weird direction things that result in actual implementation that can matter. And I hope that's some of what this program helps deploy. And just the last quick comment is states. Like, let's not forget about states. And I really think of New America as this incredible bright spot in partnership with states. So just want to say that's something I look forward to talking about more.
Cool. We have alluded to EPIC and New America partnering together. So today is the formal kickoff of an initiative that EPIC and New America are working on for the next 15 months to have a dedicated capacity working across 4 different environmental topic areas with respect to policy, design, data, and product or tool development. You'll hear from the fellows in terms of what their specific focus areas are, but one of the things that we're prioritizing in this effort is saying, how do we take some of the great talent that existed within government, great technical and environmental expertise that existed inside of government, have an intentional interconnected team of experts that are working on these issues in collaboration with our federal colleagues where they're still able to do this work, and intentional effort with states across the US. So you're gonna hear a bit more about that. But again, the point of this is to say over the next 15 months, have a concerted effort in thinking about what are the types of digital services that we need now and can be building into the future around these critical environmental issues. So with that, each fellow is going to have about 5 minutes, which is not enough time, but is a little flavor of the type of work that they're doing. And then we'll go into breakout group discussions once we hear from all of the fellows in their topic areas. And so I think perfect ordering, JR is going to kick us off. Do you want to stay seated or do you want to stay either way?
I would like to stay seated. Okay. Also, I told Gabe that he was first, so that's why we just had a chuckle. It's a joke. Hello, my name's J.R. Washabek, and I am a senior fellow for AI and ecosystem management at EPIC with the DSP pilot. I came from the Forest Service, and I still have to hold back tears about leaving, but I made the choice to leave because I no longer felt value aligned to some of the things that I thought were coming for federal land management. And that's a complex thing, so please ask me about it. It's less monolithic than you might think. The Forest Service is near and dear to my heart. I started as a wilderness ranger in a temporary seasonal position. I was hired on as a conservation education specialist where I was supposed to be teaching children about conservation, but instead I ended up teaching people on my forest and district how to use digitally modern technologies to do their work, which was very exciting. I advanced to just like huge side quests that turned into my adult career. Was moved into the National Forest System Deputy Chief's office just before the pandemic as a special staff assistant. And then when we went to remote operations, was put in charge of various things and moved to the Office of the Chief, where I had the privilege of leading the 2020 presidential transition team in the form of creating the briefing package that summarized all of the agency's issues at the time, including the wildfire crisis strategy, which resulted in the bipartisan infrastructure law and Inflation Reduction Act and a ton of money and added capacity. I moved from that position into working with Zahid Chaudhry, who was in the CIO at the time. I told him I would like to build the agency's first AI program, and he made space in place for me to do that, even though it was not in my job description. I love the Forest Service. I am very future focused and enthusiastic about land management, ecosystem management, and the future that is to come. Because of my background in the Forest Service and land management, I feel like I have a very strong ethical tie to deliberative democracy and public participation in making decisions about what we do with our public lands. And I believe that now is the time to steer advanced tech development. So I design governance and community metrics to deliver people and nature benefits now and for future generations, what I'm hoping to bring big picture to Epic. How am I doing that? Open standards, living digital forest models, you can read this on the screen, ethical AI guardrails, and an upskilled workforce, which is critical for faster and transparent decision making. And I will attempt to advance the next slide. How am I doing this? So forests are, fun fact, they cover 33% of the US land mass. They are not only fun for recreation and timber production, and it's not only wildfires that happen on them, they supply all of our clean air and 20% of our drinking water, which has an intersection with the work that you're here from following fellows. They are under strain from many different perspectives. I will not detail the things that are currently happening in regards to land management and the backbone environmental laws that underpin our management practices, but I will say that I am passionate about and optimistic about advanced technologies and our capability to leverage those to produce amazing results for the American public with the lands and specifically forests that we call home in our country. So with that,
stop.
I will stop. I think next is not Gabe. It is Gabe.
Thank you, JR. Appreciate it. I'm Gabe Watson, lead nerd, also known as manager of data science and applications, but lead nerd is a lot fewer syllables. I've been at Epic for 3 years now, coming up, 3 years in November, located in Baltimore, Maryland. So first off, my background is in data science, right? I think about problems in an analytical, statistical type of way. Maps are also sort of a niche thing, so geospatial work, place-based understanding of how problems play out. That's really the foundation of how I approach a lot of this work. And as you can see on the screen, right, I want to answer questions and make things. I don't think it's sufficient to sort of toddle around and sort of, poke and prod and maybe this, maybe that. Like, actually, what are the things that we need to know to be able to move forward and make decisions, and moving towards that with good data, good information is sort of the objective there. And then make things. So application development, right? A lot of stuff that we see, a lot of change is made, whether it's through story maps, whether it's through an analytical tool, right? Or just like that simple graphic that just like, whoa, I get it now, right? We want to produce stuff. We want to have content that actually is able to inform, seed, or change the conversation. Moving on, I like to think, everything, most things are related, right? In some way, shape, or form. And in approaching a lot of the work through an interdisciplinary lens, slow down there, is just the way I sort of do things. So whether it's thinking about wetlands in the context of drinking water, source water protection, or cumulative impacts in the environmental justice context, right? Everything kind of builds on everything else. And for the geospatial nerds in the room, first law of geography, Tobler's law, everything is related to everything else, but near things are more related than distant things, right? And so thinking about these concepts, right, both in terms of a domain and genre transition, but then also from an analytical standpoint, from a spatial standpoint. Lastly, and I know it says first at the end of this, but really what drives my work is understanding that I believe personally that folks do have an inalienable right and access to green spaces, clean drinking water, clean air, right? Safeguards from industrial pollution is just where sort of the central place that I start from. And furthermore, right, these green spaces, these wilds, these natures have an intrinsic right unto themselves, right? So coming at it from a value perspective, I have 1 minute left. Moving on to drinking water. Next slide.
Nailed it.
Cool. So on the drinking water side, our aim is to build the single largest repository of drinking water data for decision-making. I added that for decision-making part because I was like, you know what? I don't think we'll be the single largest repository of drinking water because there's terabytes and terabytes somewhere of, contaminant testing data, monitoring at the utility level, right? But we're trying to address the issue of data fragmentation in the drinking water space. Fun fact here, there are more drinking water utilities in the United States than there are McDonald's, threefold. And actually it's the same number of drinking water systems in the US as there are McDonald's in the entire world. So you can get an understanding, right, of how fragmented if data is being generated for the drinking water context, right? There's a lot of entities that do that. Why this matters, drinking water, like virtually other utility and asset, right, suffers from systemic injustice, historical racism, rural, low income. I have to stop. Oh, okay.
And just as it
Thank you. Suffer from these things at a greater rate, right? Native American serving water systems have 3 times the rate of health-based violations. We've been piloting a lot of this drinking water work in Texas. East Texas has $20,000 less median household income than the rest of Texas and has a 60% higher rate of health-based violations, right? So these numbers and differences are startling, right? And I think a lot of that is derived from this data fragmentation problem. So what we're doing is we're trying to harmonize and bring together all the different sources on drinking water and all the ancillary data, right, that is able to say, what are the problems at hand? How do we build solutions? Who are the people who need to be involved? The spatial piece, how do these things play out on the landscape? That's sort of where the work is oriented. We can chat more. Sorry, that was quick.
Do you have them? Click. Yeah, I do. There you go. See if this works. And last.
Friends and acolytes, it is a pleasure to be here on the eve in which the prophecy will be fulfilled. And I believe that... Wrong meeting, sorry. Hello, my name is Boone Sheridan. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I am working on digital permitting and technology with EPIC. My past ex-18Fer spent a lot of time working on technology. I got sucked into the world of permitting with the Council for Environmental Quality and kind of fell into a place where I absolutely loved it. I just could not get enough of the people I met and learning about what was happening and all of the things that were going on underneath. It became really, really important for me to understand that there's so many things about people and tools in here. Permitting has so many different parts to it. It is one of the most amazing 3D puzzles I've ever seen. But at each step, I've met some amazing people who have great stories to tell, who want to do great work. Permitting is involved in so many different parts of the world we live in. Early on in doing this, someone said to me, you may not care about permitting, but permitting cares about you. So the idea of getting involved and continuing to do this digital work, which I had hoped to continue at 18F, but wasn't able to, not my decision, we'll talk about that later, but coming to EPIC and having the opportunity to do it is really, really cool, and I'm so appreciative of it. So, permitting. In some ways, you could say permitting is one of the most equitable things in the world because no one is happy with it. Everyone is convinced that permitting is broken. Everyone is convinced that actually they're the last person to know. There's always this talk of like, someone did something before me and I don't know who's supposed to do it afterwards. It is one of those spaces where there's so much going on. When I started, I have collected over 200 visualizations and flowcharts for permitting across the country, and including some of our friends overseas. Everyone describes permitting differently, and that's important in one key way. We have different terms for how it's handled conceptually, how it's handled technologically, and how it's handled socially and culturally. What we talk about, and the science that people do, and the outcomes that come from it. So my goal is to find repeatable solutions and to understand the problem space, to get to an understanding of permitting that we can talk about it, not that we all do the same thing, but we can use the same concepts and ideas to discuss permitting, to find areas for innovation, to find areas of discussion and improvement. So that when someone comes to me, as they have for the last 3 years, and say, permitting stinks, it's broken, I say, great, tell me more about it. Oh, well, we really can't do our early assessments because we don't get information from the feds. You've got data you want to get from the feds. Gotcha. You're talking about interoperability with data. You want to share data and standards. Let's dig into that. Or, I can't stand the fact that I don't think my voice was heard. Public commenting. Okay, let's talk about it. What would make you feel that your voice was heard? What does accountability look like when you're in public commenting? So by getting to drill down deeper into areas of the phases, the tasks, and the work that's done, gets us to common language and gets us to a space where I'm mapping out the layers. You've got policy, people, applications, systems, data, and infrastructure that all play a role, and they're all connected. So finding a way to come up with a framework that we can have good conversations, whether it's a technology provider, whether it's a community activist. Everyone has a space to play in this and wants to know where they fit, wants to know what they do, feeds into something else, and gets to an end result that everyone is hopefully happy with. It is impossible to talk about this without recognizing where we stand as a country right now, and I want to make this perfectly clear. Permitting is transparency. It is a record of who did what, when, and why. Things happening with no record are my nightmare. Something that is done without a record of reasoning and without a justification. Permitting is inherently saying, you're going to do this, these are the rules, and these are the things that we think we will have to consider, and when litigation occurs, who gets to get called in and tell their side of the story. I like to think of this as we're making a point of making it so that anyone can tell their story, it can be clearly documented and shared, and the lessons learned by one group can be shared, whether it's a Fed, state, locality, private company, public interest, can all contribute to the process and see where they fit. Thank you.
Yep. Is this thing on? Yes, it is. Okay. Hello, nice to meet you all. I'm Emily. I'm a data scientist. I promise I did not add extraordinaire to this slide. But my kind of transition into this work has been a little kind of unconventional. I started as a marine ecologist. I did a lot of research on, applaud, on sea turtles and fish and understanding how they use Earth's magnetic field to navigate their environment. I also spent my fair bit of time wrangling seals in Antarctica to understand their diving behavior, and spent a lot of time after the field processing data, staring at my computer, being really frustrated in front of my computer, and found out that I actually really enjoyed it and loved coding. And I loved solving big problems with data, looking at large trends, trying to figure out what's going on and what that can tell us about the surrounding ecosystem. During that time in academia, I was then interested in understanding what wildlife research looked like outside of academia. So then I was a contractor at U.S. Fish and Wildlife for about 2 years, where I helped develop conservation plans for national wildlife refuges within the Southeast. And then I also did a lot of research on wetlands to understand whether or not wetlands were keeping pace with sea level rise, particularly in and along the coast, along the Southeast. So I spent a lot of time measuring wetlands, being in the field, looking at vegetation and understanding how they work. And during that time that I spent in the federal government, I also became really passionate about making and working towards efficient, data-driven environmental progress. I like to tell my team that I think and dream about data all the time, and it follows me everywhere. Truly, yeah. I became really passionate about making data landscapes and ecosystems, data ecosystems, more interoperable and connected, and also brainstorming how we can develop tools within the open source environment to help make environmental progress more efficient. Next slide's probably that one. Yes. And now I get to talk about wetlands. So as a lot of people know, and there's a bonus picture of me in the field. There was a hole in one of those waders and my left boot was filled with water, and it was in January, and so it was really cold. But I'm smiling and having a great time. But as a lot of y'all probably know, wetlands are extremely vital ecosystems. They support biodiversity, they protect communities from storm surge, they sequester carbon, they filter our water. We benefit from wetlands in a variety of different ways. But despite their importance, we actually don't have an accurate, up-to-date map of where wetlands exist. As Jesse was talking about, the National Wetlands Inventory is one of the best data sets that we have, but it is woefully out of date in some areas, but is still a really excellent data set when it has been recently updated. And not knowing where wetlands are makes it really difficult to avoid impacts to wetlands early in project cycles and also identify what wetlands need to be restored. Also, as very dynamic and sensitive ecosystems, it's really important to have good data and up-to-date data in order to make good decisions. So to make progress towards this work, we've been leading a community of practice over the past year. That's involved about 55 plus individuals from over 30 organizations to brainstorm how the wetland data landscape can be more connected, such that we have access to more up-to-date and accurate information on our nation's wetlands. We've had so many conversations about how difficult this work is. So how do you address the fact that the definition of a wetland in the permitting space is actually very different than the scientific space? How do we track ecosystems that are so dynamic, like wetlands that change day to day and year to year and over time? And also, how can we collaborate better? And that's been a really fun community that we've been fostering. And lately, we've made an exciting pivot to talking about the problems and barriers that exist and understanding the problem space towards actually building solutions together. And I got the stop sign. But one of the ways that we've been thinking about doing that is helping build guidance for people to understand what data set to use when for their particular use case, and also collaborating with OpenStreetMap to help make data from field observations more accessible so that everyone can benefit from all of the rich data that's collected in the field and also improve modeled wetland locations as well. Thank you. I think I pass it to Jesse, probably.
Okay. So again, rapid fire overview of what we are doing. We now wanted to take the time to actually talk about that in more depth within each of these tables. So if you're at a table that maybe only has 2 or 3 people, join a table in the back. I imagine maybe 4, 5 tables is probably what we want to consolidate to. And then we'll have a fellow at each of the tables, recognizing that you might have expertise in any of these given topics. It is okay. If that fellow is there, that does not mean you were only talking about drinking water. What we really wanted to talk about are kind of these 3 different questions. And the point of today is really to invite y'all into this work. So what are we working on that might complement some of your own efforts? What should we know about? What don't we know about? How should we think about the role of working with government at the state, local, and federal levels in addressing the policy design, tooling, or there was a 4th one, policy design, tools, and data in the implementation of some of these projects. And then, like I said, who else should we be working with if it's not you? So with that, we have about 35 minutes or so to work in each of these tables. So shuffle if you need to shuffle, and then we'll go ahead and get started.